It looks so unassuming. Just a seemingly displaced doorway into a hillside, surrounded by a wintry wasteland like a scene from the remote ice planet of Hoth, if you're a Star Wars fan. But behind that door is a treasure beyond price. In such a barren and bleak surrounding, held in trust, are the seeds of a new Eden, should such ever become necessary. Perhaps you've heard of, or perhaps you recognize from the image, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. I geek out a little bit when I think of the Seed Vault, perhaps because it's just so cool. The vault is located on a remote island in the Svalbard archipelago above the Arctic Circle and halfway between mainland Norway and the North Pole. Svalbard is the farthest north a person can fly on a scheduled flight. Nobody gets there by accident. And behind that unassuming doorway, 100 meters deep in the side of the mountain, are millions of seeds representing every important food crop available in the world today, stored there by countries from around the globe. The vault contains everything from African and Asian food staples such as maize and rice and wheat and sorghum, to European and South American varieties of eggplant, lettuce, barley, and potato. The vault's location prevents it from flooding, even projecting worst-case scenario sea level rises, as well as from pestilence, from warfare, from famine. It's as secure a place as Earth can offer to house the ultimate fail-safe, a reboot, a new hope for a new life. The vault holds hope in case worst comes to absolute worst, in case through some environmental or meteorological or human-caused disaster, the existence or the genetic diversity of food crops is threatened. We don't really need to imagine some whole Earth apocalyptic event to necessitate the opening of the vault, like the meteor strike that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. According to Reuters, Syria's ongoing civil war has had devastating effects upon Syria's farming infrastructure. 2016's wheat production, for example, was merely a tenth of 2015's. But in Svalbard's vault lie the seeds for Syria's renewal. Or should sub-Saharan Africa experience another devastating drought, the seeds of recovery are ready, held in trust. If we think about it, regional food disasters will surely come. History tells us as much, from the Irish potato famine of the 1840s, which caused a 25% drop in the island's population, to America's Dust Bowl in the 1930s, which affected 100 million acres of land in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, and Colorado. And when, not if, but when, the next crisis comes, it will be time for the opening of the vault. Now you might ask, why all this talk of stored seed and famine, of catastrophe and of renewal? Well, that's the image that came to me as I was reading this morning's scripture passage from Galatians. I read first Paul's description of the works of the flesh. See if some of these sound all too familiar. Enmities, strife, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, idolatry. Taken collectively, they sound like a dust bowl of the human spirit, if you will. And would you agree that it feels as though we are experiencing something akin to a dust bowl of the human spirit? A time when once healthy relationships have grown blighted, when the aquifers of kindness have begun to run dry, and when the social, political, and relational landscape is in distress. Does that sound alarmist, or extremist, or inaccurate, or despairing? I don't intend it to be so. And yet I observe a sort of a harshness, a hardening, a change in the landscape in which too often ugliness is the order of the day. Things that shouldn't be okay are okay. It isn't that such things haven't been a part of our lives all along. It's that weeds spring up in untended lawns, and there does come a tipping point where the weeds begin to flourish and the lawn is in distress. So, take racism, for example. It's always been present, as much as I'd like to deny it, as much as my privilege has permitted me to overlook it. But casual racism has grown predictable, permissible, and commonplace, as if it's been allowed to come out and play openly of late. The overt and obvious example is the rally of white supremacists in Charlottesville last fall. But to read the newspaper is to see a world that I don't want to admit exists. Two black men sitting in a Philadelphia Starbucks, and the manager calls the police. The men are led away in handcuffs for waiting while black. A Yale graduate student is napping in her dormitory commons room, and another student calls campus security on her for the offense of napping while black. A golf club in Pennsylvania calls police on a group of women playing golf because they're playing too slowly while black. It's as if my darker-skinned sisters and brothers live in a different country than I do, certainly in a whole different reality than I do. I've never had anyone attempt to suppress or repress my voting rights. My parents never had to have the talk with me. Be polite. Keep your hands in sight. Don't wear a hoodie. Keep your cell phone in your pocket, not in your hand, whatever you do. Don't be too loud. But to call attention to institutionalized racism in our society by silently kneeling during the national anthem at a football game, well, that's disrespectful. That's unpatriotic. And this week, our president said famously, maybe those people don't deserve to live in this country. Can we advance the slide? Maybe those people don't deserve to live in this country. Speaking of not deserving to live in this country, we might think of our treatment of the immigrants and the refugees and the aliens in our midst. Now, I know that a country with no borders isn't a country. I know that we have to have immigration laws and immigration quotas and a proper legal path to citizenship which must be followed. We also have as a national symbol a 305-foot-tall lady standing in a harbor and lifting freedom's torch. And inscribed on her base are the words penned by Emma Lazarus, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." We still believe that, don't we? Or is there small print on the package that merely says, "Serving suggestion"? In contrast to the statue's message, last Tuesday, a New York attorney was filmed during a tirade where he lambasted the manager of Fresh Kitchen on Madison Avenue for allowing his staff to speak Spanish in my country and raged about paying for their welfare. We might wish that that attorney was the exception and not the rule, but it was just 3 weeks ago in a local bank that Sharon Dreyer and her daughter and son-in-law witnessed a customer yelling at a teller in a hijab. Hateful things, hurtful things, horrendous things. It is as if people have become emboldened in their dehumanization of difference. Also, in contrast to the statue's message, we have now normalized an unprecedented practice of separating illegal immigrant mothers from their children. Those who are charged with improper entry, a misdemeanor on the first infraction, are jailed and held separately from their children. Previously, most parents had been allowed to remain with their children in family shelters while awaiting asylum cases or deportation proceedings. The climate of hostility, not of hospitality, and our crop of compassion is failing. Our crop of compassion is failing. If you want to look at the fleshly works that Paul enumerates, such as anger, dissension, or factionalism, you only need to look at the coarsening of our political discourse. The hostility, the mutual name-calling, the mudslinging, the twisting of truth. The kingdom of God in our midst doesn't seem so very near right now. In contrast to such works, Paul sets forth the fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Spirit, Paul writes, is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And that, you see, is what set me to thinking about seeds. The purpose of fruit is, the very reason for the existence of fruit is the distribution of seeds. It doesn't exist merely to be attractive. It doesn't exist purely or primarily to be enjoyed or to be consumed. That's a means to an end. Fruit exists to spread and to propagate seed. And that, in turn, set me to thinking that the church exists to be a sort of a spiritual Svalbard, a place where the seeds of the fruit of the Spirit are gathered and tended and stored and saved and dispensed and dispersed upon a world where the spiritual dust bowl holds its seeming sway. Like many of you, I was captivated and inspired by the sermon that Bishop Michael Curry preached at the wedding of Britain's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. A sermon that spoke of the redemptive power of love in the world. I have no words to improve upon his words, so I'll just repeat a few of them. There's power in love. There's power in love to help and heal when nothing else can. There's power in love to lift up and liberate when nothing else will. Imagine our homes and families where love is the way. Imagine neighborhoods and communities where love is the way. Imagine governments and nations where love is the way. Imagine businesses and commerce where love is the way. When love is the way, no child will go to bed hungry in this world ever again. When love is the way, we will let justice roll down like a mighty stream and righteousness like an ever-flowing brook. When love is the way, poverty will become history. When love is the way, the earth will be a sanctuary. When love is the way, we will lay down our swords and shields down by the riverside to study war no more. When love is the way, there's plenty good room for all of God's children, because when love is the way, we actually treat each other, well, like we're actually family. But the love of which Curry speaks is no mere feeling. It's not a sentiment. It's a choice. It's a decision. It's a commitment. It is a strong seed that can take root in the most inhospitable soil. It is the active and intentional practice of hospitality and compassion. It is the seeking of the image of God in each other and in every other. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians the unmistakable hallmarks of love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth, not in fake news, but in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love does not puff itself up nor seek its own welfare. It casts out bigotry, casts out ugliness, casts out greed, and replaces it with generosity. And it's not enough for us to come together into the church and to contemplate love. Our task, our calling, our reason for existence as the church is to go out into the world and to cultivate love. Not contemplate love, but cultivate love. We sow love in the dry places and the arid spaces of the world, not in the easy places, but in the needy places, because the very purpose of fruit is to spread seeds where seed is not. Jesus himself has shown us what love is, how it is to be embodied and demonstrated, how it is to be sacrificially employed. Love welcomes the stranger. It doesn't separate her from her children at the border. Love binds the wounds of neighbors. Love visits prisoners and cares for widows and orphans. Love forgives. Love nurtures, and love nourishes. But love is not weak or soft. Love stands up. Love speaks out. Love has no tolerance for intolerance or for incivility. Love calls out unfairness and oppression. Love demands justice, equal justice for all. And where the playing field tilts in favor of the rich, the privileged, or the advantaged, or the opportunistic, love levels it. This week, a number of folks from our congregation had an opportunity to join with religious leaders from multiple denominations, among them Bishop Curry, but also Walter Brueggemann and Father Richard Rohr and James Forbes and Tony Campola and Cynthia Hale, women and men whose names form a virtual who's who of influential theologians and clergy in our country, at a worship service and a silent march to the White House entitled Reclaiming Jesus. And the purpose of the march and of the movement is symbolically and actively to reclaim the words and the work and the mission and the ministry of Jesus in the midst of a divisive and politicized and polarized climate. I invite you, I urge you to go to the website reclaimingjesus.org to read the confessional statement that these leaders have put forth. It's in essence a manifesto of ministry, a labor of love, a call to us to open up the vault and to sow the seeds of spiritual renewal far and wide. It's a reminder not to conceive of church as a place we go, but as a people we are, and as a people we are in the world. People of God, we are a spiritual Svalbard, but the seeds don't grow in the vault. Their purpose is to sow life in the world where life is lacking, and to show love in the world where love is lacking. Our task is to be Johnny Appleseed. Where can you, where can I, where can we plant a little love this week? Amen.